And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have two of my good brothers on this grand, infamous return of the Gazette. We have the man who is green with evil, the man of a thousand miniatures in spandex, good brother Zeltrax, and we have making his Gazette debut, the one and only Dr. Beardman, not to be confused with Dr. Monarch.
Yo.
So it is May 1st. As I am recording this, the Kentucky Derby is on in the background. And I think a lot more people are clamoring to it because, well, people are being starved of sports with some kind of crowd. Um, plus it's one of those traditions, and hey, NBC paid a shitload of money to get to broadcast it. Wish they could have spent. Wish they could have put some of that money into keeping NBCSN afloat, but it is what it is, because that's caused a bit of a feeding frenzy with everybody trying to grab its properties over the last few weeks. Because NBCSN isn't dead yet. It doesn't technically die until it finishes its contracts in November, but once that goes, the question of who's gonna handle Kentucky Derby, who's gonna handle NASCAR, who's gonna handle hockey is up in the air. Well, except for the NHL one, that's already been resolved, and the Turner Network ended up getting NHL, which is going to create its own set of complications. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, let's get down to why we're here, okay? Okay, boss?
Moving right along,
Mm-hmm.
it's time we begin with the Kickstarter Spotlight. And our first entry, coming to us all the way from Shenzhen, China, apparently, is an entry that as a fan of certain sports in my area, has a title that is very apropos: Suffering, which they are
Mm-hmm.
boasting as probably the hardest turn-based RPG. Um, bold claim there. So they're going.
Yeah, bold claim. Let's see how this pays off.
Mm-hmm. So, why is the thing? So they were asking for 37,000 Hong Kong dollars, and they're currently at 38.4 thousand with 10 days to go. And let's see. So the the approach that we're definitely seeing is certainly on the turn based and certainly on the solo end. They full out admit that Dark Souls is one of their inspirations. Um,
And I'm detecting a little bit of Hollow Knight judging by the screenshots, but it could just be me.
I'm not getting any Hollow Knight vibes when it comes to the gameplay loop, because this is going turn based. It isn't a platformer.
Ah.
See, the main character is an ordinary human that accidentally fell into the realm of suffering, and players won't be able to return to the mortal realm until they defeat every sinner in the realm of suffering. The realm of suffering feels like something that Clive Barker would write.
Yeah.
See, then we have the story and concept. I have to make sure I have this muted when the thing actually plays. Sins breed misfortune. And misfortune twists lives. Okay, we have the Descent, and they've got some nice wallpaper setups, I'll give them that.
Mm-hmm.
Says, as a turn-based game, it breaks out of the replay frame and adds multiple reincarnations to the traditional turn-based mechanism. They are going to be putting this on Steam Early Access in 13 days, and they plan to run that for 8 to 12 months. Oddly enough, the game that I'm reminded of the most when I look at this is not Hollow Knight, but Darkest Dungeon.
Ah. Yeah.
It looks like you have, especially given the fact that you have to bring a set of you're bringing a set of weapons, items, and spells to bear, each with their own resources and with their own catches. Apparently, they plan on putting a few elements of QTE into turn-based combat, which interesting choice, as well as a astrology system based on your luck attribute. But ultimately, since they are taking cues from Souls, it's going to be all about the bosses, which go in multiple phases. And apparently, they are planning on introducing a bit of a summoning system that they're taking cues from Final Fantasy from. Let's see, then we go with multiple tactics. The first stage is Break. Both sides have their own defense point, which will decrease when being attacked. Once that drops to 0, they'll enter a break state for 3 rounds. The second stage is Overkill. Under Break, each sinner can only withstand attacks to a certain extent, which is represented by a limit value. Players will need to execute attacks that exceed that limit in order to finish Overkill in 3 rounds. Then the final stage is Killing Time. Let's see, then we have some of the stretch goals that they have planned.
Wallpaper, minigame, a third reincarnation.
It's interesting that hang on a moment. And we are back. I think it's impressive that they're being fairly open about the development. When it comes to these devs, I may try and drop them a line, but I'm not holding out a ton of hope because they're all the way out in China. You know, because if I haven't made it clear enough already, I hate time zones.
Me too.
Yeah, time zone can be a pain.
So next we have something in my wheelhouse. Grim Hollow, the Monster Grimoire. And this is a bit of a follow-up to something that I covered a few months back. If you recall, about a year ago, I covered Grim Hollow, which was going to be a grimdark take on the 5th edition rule set. Well, that came out, and in the interest of disclosure, yeah, I did back it.
Hmm.
And now they're coming out with a bestiary for the thing. And whenever this kind of thing comes up, I always see people going, why didn't they do that for the first batch? They didn't know they didn't know how far they'd and all things considered, this isn't just going to be like a few monsters. We're dealing with at least 400.
To be honest, boss, I'm kind of with you there on the whole why would you want a bestiary right out the gate thing?
Um it's a I can understand why, but it's also important to note that this is not doing this is not doing the default high fantasy approach. Um Now, something that I do think they did smartly is, as they point out here, every backer who pledges will get their layers PDF for free, and anybody who backs with a tier with physical items will get both the PDF and the softcover booklet, which which I'd say there's going to be a lot of happy customers on that because they were only asking for 20,000. They are at the time of this recording, just under 612,000, with 20 days
Damn.
to go.
Yeah, I think they'll make it.
They'll probably get 750,000 before it's all done. So yeah, the Grim Hollow, the monster grimoire, is adding a bunch of monsters specifically for running dark fantasy style campaigns.
Hmm.
So they go Savage Beasts, Twisted Aberrations, Unrelenting Undead. All that is covered, as well as some player facing content such as familiars, sidekicks, and a few more. Along with treasure and suggested salvage. The salvage thing is interesting to me because when I had Zen and Ash on, we talked about the trophy mechanic that we had suggested for Rangers. And then we have something like this because, well, you can't just leave the monster dead there. You gotta do some looting. That's something that's been a thing since antiquity. When Hercules killed the Hydra, figuring waste not want not, use some of the blood to make poison arrows. Granted, that ended up biting him in the ass, but that's how it goes with mythology. Um, and the example that they give is what could be done with the fangs of a vanquished vampire. I don't know. I don't know. Take them out and use them to use them on a war club or something like that. At least that's what I'd do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and methods to experiment with foes. So putting in changes for current foes, including putting in monster templates. Nice. Advice on encounter and campaign building. Which is appreciated. It's not something that I'm going to use because most of the time the one part of a book that I always kind of glaze over is the GM section because it's a lot of it is telling me stuff that I already kind of know.
Mm.
So, and we have the reward tiers. Although I'm curious how big their gigantic miniatures are. Like the example, I think that's supposed to be a bat. That doesn't look like a dragon. So
Mm-hmm.
they're also doing card boxes, which I think are going to be quick references for all the monsters, which is nice. But since it's not something that I'm going to use much myself because I've transitioned more over to virtual tabletop these days. Let's see. As far as regular size, we have Tumblr users. Sorry, zombies.
Ha!
Um, CNN watchers. Sorry, human cultists. Bugbears, the Hurok, and ghouls. Let's see. Then for large, we have fire devils, zombie trolls. There's a horrifying thought.
No.
Um, Caprathorns, which is one of one of those things that could only come out of Eastern Europe. Welcome to the forest of ancient Scandinavia. Everything wants to kill you. And size gigantic, we have the demon oak. Brothers, get me the axe. Actually, you know what?
Pretty much, yeah.
Take
How big?
take one of the bigger. Take one of the tree huggers. Maybe we can use that as bait. Okay, I was right. One of the gigantic examples is the Chiropteran behemoth. So I was right in it being a bat. Let's see, and then some of the add-ons, including add-ons for the players and campaign guide, both of which I have. Let's see, then we have some of the stretch goals and the team in question, along with the fact that they're going to be running play tests all throughout the campaign. I did try and contact them to do an interview. No response.
Ouch.
That ain't good.
It probably would. Maybe it was a blessing in disguise because trying to do an interview would have been tricky since they're out in Melbourne. I mean, I've done interviews with Australian folk in the past, and Wade Dyer has always been cool with me, but um, it is still a royal pain because it's either no matter which side I end up doing it, it's somebody's morning.
Mm.
So next we have something that I did interview the developer of, Stormweavers, a solo tabletop game. So he was asking for 8,000 euros. He is currently at 65,000 and change with 12 days to go. And he is going for a solo RPG that is integrating a bit more detailed approach to combat than a lot of game books do. He's the guy behind it is also a big fan of. I'll also give him props for the fact that the. Hang on again. Sorry about that. I do appreciate that the protagonist in this little project is a dwarf and not a stinking elf.
Welcome back.
Thank you much. Because as I've made clear, I do not care for elves.
Mm-hmm.
So, and as I mentioned in the past, I did have the guy on for an interview, and I had to take a cold shower afterwards because I ended up having to use Zoom.
Mm.
Now what I do find kind of interesting is that he has kind of a soft AI setup, because when it comes to combat, even though this is a solo game, he wants combat to be a full grid-based approach, much in the same way that a more traditional RPG would. It's certainly an interesting approach, and I do hope that at the very least he gets to 80,000 euros so I can see what kind of music he'd put out for this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if he. Okay, so the last one was it. Yeah, then the updates. At the very least, I'm pretty sure Jacob Ross is gonna get a kick out of this, because that's kind of his thing these days, is doing solo games, and tagging me in the process whenever he does one of his streams. So next, and full disclosure, I've had this guy on twice, even though, and he's from my neck of the woods, but War and Aether.
Nice.
Which he was only asking for 1,000. He's slightly over it with 21 days to go. His whole aim with War and Aether was to take the setup that's seen in Pathfinder, and one, go full classless with it, and two, lean more in the realm of low fantasy. And one of the and a lot of and because of that, there's a lot of the mechanics that are going to be very familiar. It is still largely using a D20 based approach, but it has a lot more emphasis on skills instead of doing the typical class approach. There's also the fact that he decided to do an interesting approach when it came to spell casting, in the sense that there's a series of casting paths, but there isn't a codified spell list.
Mm.
He had also cited Dragon's Dogma as the inspiration for doing a time factor when it comes to spell casting. And something that certainly amused me. I asked him about the alchemy system that he has in the game, and he outright said, "Yeah, I wanted something like in The Witcher," which I'm perfectly fine with.
Mm-hmm.
But I did now. He's had for a good while. He's had the material for the thing on a free early access policy. Once the Kickstarter closes, that's obviously going to change, and he's looking for around 300 pages or so. The real thing that I hope to test in the future with this one is how well it's going to handle Gish, characters who are a little bit martial and a little bit magical. Because that's a very easy pitfall to fall into. But moving right along. So another one, and this one he's kind of admitted is probably not going to be going anywhere. But Caga Roots of a Very Old Tree. a young adult story that's based in African mythology.
Mm.
Um, you go- so I should note that he's not only handling the writing, but all of the art that's on the page and would be in the book is his. Um, and one could argue he's dipping a little bit into isekai in the sense that you have an average student all of a sudden finding themselves in a whole other world, um, along with a theme of science versus magic in that setting. But he had also went into a lot on, and in the interview that I did with him, we ended up going quite a bit into the magic system. And the two things that he cited as a bit of an inspiration were Brandon Sanderson, because he had been reading because he had cited Mistborn as an inspiration, and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Mm.
Um, and when it comes to the stat setup, yeah, that's pretty clear. Instead of basing powers on on songs or bands or the like, he decided to base them on idioms.
Hmm.
So, but he really seemed to enjoy the time that he had here, even though I think I may have been a little too sharp for my own good regarding certain things that I had predicted that may or may not have been spoilers that I stumbled into.
Hmm.
Wasn't trying to. It's just I've read and watched way too much stuff, there are certain tells. But next, Whisker Squadron.
Oh,
Huh?
Yep.
Why is this reminding me about the Meower Rangers thing that Saban tried to do?
I don't think that's what we're going with this. I think we are going with a very simple question. Can you do a barrel roll?
Ah. Because when I first heard the name, I was like, "Oh dear God in heaven! Thank God it's a Starbucks like." Because that logo is very Starbucks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, forward-scrolling aerial combat with feline heroes in a procedurally generated world from the creators of Race the Sun. Race the Sun is a little game that I'm familiar with. It was one of the first PS4 games I bought off of the network, and is ended up being my kill time game because it's basically an endless race against the sun. Um, Now they were asking for 30,000. They are at 46 and change with 4 days to go. Apparently, if they can get to 50K, then they'll be able to do fully customizable ships. I hope, and I do love what they had commented on it. What's the fun in saving the galaxy if you can't do it in style?
I know, right? Sometimes you can't help but want to look a little cool when you're saving the world.
Mm-hmm. So they are doing their own take on forward-scrolling aerial combat. Um, they're planning on doing a release in 2022 on PC and consoles. They already have a Steam page up. Um, and yes, they freely admit that Star Fox was one of their was one of their big inspirations, and they've been wanting to do this kind of thing for a long time. So, because the only I am interested in how they'd plan on doing something like procedurally generated worlds. But for all intents and purposes, we have Star Fox with cats.
Because why not cats?
Um,
Did I overstep or something?
no. Let's see, then we have a bit of, we have so the thing that I'm interested in how they'd implement it, and is one of the things I'd ask about if I get them on, is the whole procedural generation thing. Because are we going roguelike of the go forward until you die, or are we going something different? Um, but since it seems that the worlds are generated from pattern chunks, it's probably not a it's not at the extreme end of procedural generation. So fortunately, we're not dealing with Bethesda shit here.
Thank God.
Mm-hmm. So I do appreciate that they went with this very minimalist approach. Um, although apparently anybody who backed at 200 or above, you would be able to be a Easter egg, as shown in this concept involving their cat.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. Um, so then we have the people involved and the schedule. So they're planning on putting a early access to the beta in June. And apparently most of the budget is going to be on their end. The Kickstarter part is only covering 15% of it. And looks like half of the budget is going to be solely on programming. So not too shabby.
Mm-hmm.
We still play. I mean, we still play well. Hopefully.
So next, and this particular adventure, I will be interviewing its creator later this month. Dawn of the Necromancer. So he was only asking for 6,000. He is at 8.6 thousand with 34 days to go. Not too shabby. Um, this is coming to us from John Harmston, and this isn't too shabby for what's essentially his first Kickstarter. He also has a background in helping out with flight choreography for films. So it says, something is rotten in the town of Darwich. A mysterious creature has moved into the cemetery and murders anyone who dares enter its new hunting grounds. Eyewitness reports say the monster looks like some sort of golem carved from tombstones and mossy grave markers. A party of adventurers has been hired to rid the town of this pest, a task that should be wrapped up by the afternoon with a heavy pouch of gold awaiting its completion. Yet, could this merely be a harbinger of greater evils that infest the land? TLDR? TLDR, you want to back this project for the bonkers encounter. Every battle includes new monsters, clever tactics, wild environments, or unexpected challenges. But something that I do appreciate with this particular adventure that unfortunately I don't see as much as I'd like. This has players start at first level and go all the way to 20th. Which means if I ever revive Monastery at the Table, this would be perfect for it. See, then a few excerpts, the play tests, and apparently this was in playtest form for over a year to make sure he got balancing right. Then why he's doing Kickstarter. And I will admit that yes, I did I am probably going to be backing this.
Mm-hmm.
But and as I said before, the guy behind the thing is going to be visiting the temple very soon.
Sweet.
Next is Lost Eidolons, which is going to be a skirmish RPG that's going for a bit of a dark fantasy approach. So they're asking for 45,000. They're at 26.7 with 19 days to go. I think that they'll make it, but I'm not sure if they'll be hitting any of the stretch goals with that amount of time. Although apparently, if they do hit their goal, they'll be unlocking a permadeath mode for the game. You know, just in case you needed something besides Fire Emblem to give people nightmares. So let's see So they are, and yeah, they have admitted that Fire Emblem and Final Fantasy Tactics are their big inspirations. Not too surprising there. Let's see, and then we get, and because of those inspirations, they're going with the grid-based tactical combat approach.
Fire Emblem, anyone?
I just said that.
Oops.
Although I'm gonna hate it when this does that. What is interesting is that instead of having each individual go in their part of the turn order, they're doing a all units at once approach. I am curious if they're going to be doing the durability thing that's always been a issue I've had with Fire Emblem for years. Let's see, and then we have the non-combat segment, of course, which works about as what you'd expect. What I can safely say is that we're in an interesting time where this now makes like the third or fourth entry that I've seen of late that's very much taking cues from Fire Emblem. The most blatant example is Dark Deity, which is still in development, and apparently one of the characters involved in that is going to be voiced by Yang Ye. And Zeltrax is currently muted. But we'll see how things go about. With Lost Eidolons, I'm not entirely I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to be backing it just yet, but I may a bit down the line. Oh, and he's getting dinner.
Don't worry, don't trash. We'll leave your seat open.
Yep. So next we have Fantasy World, which I will note in this case that even though it's going to be tricky to do, I will be interviewing the developer of it. They essentially want to do their own spin on Dungeon World, which is the fantasy spin on powered by the Apocalypse, just with their own take on things. Along with going for a more larger than life approach than the more grit based approach of of Dungeon World, and be a introduction, along with being multilingual, because well, the developers are from Italy. So, says Fantasy World is a TRPG that collects the lessons learned from 11 years of Powered by the Apocalypse gaming and distills them into rules and procedures. It's both a love letter and a critique of classic design, a new kid on the block that tries to add polish and accessibility to the PBTA framework by standing on the shoulders of giants. Planning on demystifying the rules, making world building easy, having mechanics for an emergent character, as well. And so then we get a bit further into the Italian part of it. Let's see, and then how it is different. They've put in the full rulebook in wiki format, which is an interesting thing. And then why they'd be doing Kickstarter, as well as a quick setting that they've created called Silka. I've seen some people do some pretty ambitious stuff with Powered by the Apocalypse, and I feel, and what I'd be most curious about is how they'd handle non-standard approaches to fantasy. But moving right along, our last Kickstarter, Bulletville, which is asking for 100,000, and they're currently at 26.6. It's gonna be tight, but it's certainly a possibility.
I've actually seen a couple advertisements for this one on YouTube, and from what I've seen, it looks pretty interesting.
Now it's currently in alpha stage. They have a functional prototype. They're planning on doing 6v6 maps, which is certainly apropos. So it looks like but what I'm seeing is a lot of mixing a lot of things in the pot, because they want the kind of frantic shooting that you'd see in Quake, a cast of game modes like in Overwatch, progression akin to Paladins, high mobility in the vehicle combat, and a few other things. But I'd say one thing that is probably going to be the hardest sell for some is this looking too similar to Overwatch. Now the addition
Or
of the
worse.
You were saying?
Or worse, another Fortnite clone.
I'm not seeing Fortnite out of this. Kind of disqualifies when they outright state that they're using 6v6 combat.
Or did I say that then?
I would be. This is going to be one of those cases where the way they handle movement is going to be key, especially since they're still we're dealing with enhanced movement in a hero shooter, and the thing that's going to come to mind for me is Lawbreakers, because that made a big deal about trying to do elements of hero shooter with high mobility. So hopefully we don't have that kind of instance where in the span of a few months it only it whittled itself down to only 12 people playing it. But I think they've got at least a little bit of a head on their shoulders regarding what they want to do. The overall issue is whether or not they're trying to do too much at once. That and unfortunately, there's gonna be people making the Overwatch comparison, much to my annoyance. But best of luck. They're gonna need it. Speaking of luck, something that is a case of why didn't this happen sooner? Twilight Imperium has been one of my go-tos when it comes to a massive space 4X style board game for about 20 years now. And somehow it's only just now that it's getting converted into an RPG. You'd have thought Fantasy Flight or now Edge Studio would have done something like this years ago. But apparently not. So the project is going to be called Embers of the Imperium, and of course it's going to be using the Genesis system. And I'm perfectly fine with that because I don't want representation of the Genesis system as in terms of space opera to be limited to just Star Wars. Whereas Twilight Imperium has a lot more in common with a more classical approach to the space opera. So we'll see how it goes about. They're planning on putting out some more info this summer. So next, Modifice is keeping themselves busy as well with a project called Against the Gods Themselves. In an interview with Wargamer, Chris Birch, Modifice's founder, had revealed a new RPG called Against the Gods Themselves is on the way. It will take place in the same setting as Achtung Cthulhu, and apparently is going to be not only an RPG, but a transmedia project. Appropriate timing since Achtung Cthulhu just recently got a 2D20 revamp. But the difference is that according to Chris Birch, it's a vengeance story against the old gods, told all the way through time. Streamlined rules are being considered, but not if the 2D20 system will be used for the RPG. He's also talked about doing some sort of adventure wargaming with a solo setup. Interesting approach. I hope that pays off for you. Next, Beyond Belief Games is doing a new edition of their superhero RPG, Triumphant, with an exclamation point. This is coming to us from Simon Washburn, who's best known for Barbarians of Lemuria, which I hope to cover in a review sometime down the line. And it is going for a lighter spin on a Super's setup. This is it sounds more like a director's cut of the game instead of a full-on second edition, even though Triumphant originally came out 7 years ago. So this is and with all the tweaks that people have put up over the years, this is the case to try and codify everything, or as much of everything as can be codified. I'll be interested to see. I remember playing Triumphant once, but I wasn't able to dig too deep into it because I was just a player. I wasn't GMing it. Um, but it'll be an interesting experiment to delve back into to see if the setup can handle can handle a more simple approach. Since I've always had issues with rules light supers games. Um, so next, Aniplex, who is known for producing a literal shit ton of different anime, is delving into the trading card game market with Build Divide. Which I'm not opposed to the idea of them doing that. I'm opposed to the timing of it all.
Plus, there are a few other card game animes like Vanguard, Buddy Fight, some third one that I can't recall right now.
And yeah, it is getting an accompanying anime, of course, which is being written by the same people behind Kakegururi. So it's not like they don't have a lack of talent on this or anything. But it's just an odd flex. Um, and the anime is also being worked on by Linden Films, who had previously done Cells at Work. I'm not opposed to I'm not opposed to the idea. I'm just tilting my head. We'll see how things come about. Speaking of we'll see. So Games Enter Inc., a company formed by former CEO of Fantasy Flight Games Christian Peterson, has acquired the retail operations of the FFG Game Center from Asmodee North America, i.e. the event destination that's in FFG's old headquarters in Roseville. I've been there a few times. It's pretty nice. And I was there when it was still somewhat smaller. Originally it was 8,000 square feet, and they upped the size in the last few years. And his reasoning was, quote, "Despite the devastation that COVID-19 has racked upon our world and many tabletop game retailers, I strongly believe that our tabletop gaming community is eager to again share great gaming experiences face to face. We hope to make this destination even more amazing place in the future." It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see how it pays off. But now we shift into a bit of weebery. Um, starting with
And this first one goes out to all you Moonies out there.
I refuse to use the term Mooney.
Sorry, couldn't resist.
So it's already been. It was only a matter of time before the Eternal movies would be coming stateside, and it looks like it's likely that the dub is going to be on Netflix, which that's certainly going to be quite a get for them. Let's hope that they've learned their lesson from the Ava dub, and not not screw me over when it comes to bad audio editing. That and a few questionable lines. But the premiere is set for June 3rd, 2021. And the rest is just the usual press release material. So, at the very least, the date's been stamped in. Now let's see who's gonna get butt mad first. Place your bets, people. Although
Also, mind if I introduce the next one?
go ahead.
Although on the other side of the magical girl coin, let's just say a certain bunny cat is getting back in the game, or could be. I don't know.
Um, it's so this is going to be the fourth in the film series for Madoka, which is going to be a direct sequel to Rebellion. I still don't know how even after 8 years, I'm still not entirely sure how I feel about Rebellion. Um, I I need to give it a second look. 'Cause I only saw the thing once, and I had very strong opinions on it.
Mm.
But we'll see how it goes about. So next, the guy behind Tiger and Bunny has landed a new project. Creator Masafumi Nishida is handling a spy drama called, or rather, his other work, a spy drama called Tesla Note, is getting an anime, which is really damn fast because the manga only debuted back in January on Weekly Shonen Magazine. And the core of it is going to be the legacy of Nikola Tesla. Um, apparently the other bit of news was that Nishida is coming back to take control of a second season of Tiger and Bunny, which is
Yay!
for a 2022 release. That came right the hell out of nowhere.
Yeah, that's odd, but hey, more Tiger and Bunny. I ain't opposed to that.
Although here's my question about the new show: how exactly does the father of electricity's legacy translate to espionage? That's what I'm wondering.
You don't know the story about how he got screwed over by Edison? Just saying there's enough there to be worked with.
Fair point. Continue. Also, welcome back, Deltrax.
Welcome back.
So, next, with a project that's going to be airing in Japan this winter, The Faraway Paladin, in which we have essentially a kid who swears allegiance to a goddess who is raised by three undead creatures: a skeleton, a mummy, and a ghost. Just setting out on a journey to see the world. I'm probably gonna delve into this because because as I've mentioned before, I am very starved for fantasy anime that aren't isekai.
Mm.
And this is definitely the case. The other thing that's certainly going to be on my radar, and so long as I don't have any CG issues because of experiences with that series, is Nighthead 2041. Although whenever I hear 2040, I keep thinking, am I going to see the Phantom?
I feel like I should ask, but at the same time, I don't know if I want to.
If you don't want to, then don't. But this is essentially a semi reboot of Nighthead, which came out in 1992. Just dealing with the it's just that the time frame is moved forward a fair bit. But this sort of high concept SF, this is right up my damn alley. I'm just trying to figure out who's the animator. It's due to air this July as part of Fuji TV's Ultra Plus lineup. Which, wait, wasn't that the same lineup that had Ingress? That's
Ultimate Ultimate Joke Rising.
But either way, I've made it clear I'm a sucker for Japanese cyberpunk, and this is going to be no exception. But now, I feel I feel remiss if we didn't talk about the Oscars.
Bloody course, the Oscars. Fuck 'em.
One, fuck them, but two, the reason I'm talking about it this time is because there is some comedy to go over.
Oh boy.
So some of you may have seen that a while back I retweeted someone posting the year over year stats when it comes to the Oscars. And it would not be enough for me to say the Oscars sucked, moving right along. Because that's like saying Michael Bolton is a no talent ass clown. You're not exactly breaking new ground there. What I will cover is how many people were watching.
Mhm.
9.9 million, according to TV Line. Deadline reports it as 9.85. Both citing a Nielsen rating with the key demographic coming in at 1.9. That is 58% below total viewership from last year.
That has
Damn.
got to sting.
Last year was 23.6 million, and that was considered an all-time low.
Dude.
And and I've been getting reports all over the place that a lot of people in Tinseltown are panicking.
Mm.
And there's at least a fair few people in Disney who are not happy. Now as far as what Disney has to do with this, the Oscars have for a good chunk of my life been exclusively airing on ABC. ABC is owned by Disney. And as far as I'm concerned, this particular low rating is a case of chickens coming home to roost. Oh, Anthony Hopkins won Best Actor this year, and he didn't even show up.
Yeah, because apparently they wouldn't let him do an acceptance speech over Zoom. Like,
No,
seriously.
he was visiting his father's grave that day. He did he. It wasn't a case of doing an acceptance speech over Zoom. He just didn't care to show up.
Ah,
It was a hard time for him. I can kind of respect that.
I agree. But still, though, again, fuck the Oscars.
Hmm. And
Let's just move on.
to be quite honest, even if it wasn't a hard time for him, I'm not entirely sure he'd show up anyways. But now this was reported earlier this week, and I am very cautious about this. So, World of Darkness, the setting for Mage the Ascension, Vampire the Masquerade, and Werewolf the Apocalypse, are getting both television and film. This is being done by Hivemind, the company behind The Witcher and the Expanse, with writer producers Eric Hayresser and Christine Boyland are at the helm. I am extremely cautious about this. One because the press release had a case of buzzword bingo, and two, there were not too long ago there was an attempt to try and bring World of Darkness into a MMO format. And it was going to be helmed by CCP, the same people behind the monolith that is EVE Online. Should be a slam dunk, right?
Yeah.
Well,
But
it didn't even get released.
ooh.
Not only that, but around the same time there was an expansion that came out for EVE that managed to completely fuck over the game's internal economy. And because of the way EVE is set up as one of the last bastions of the sandbox-based approach, where it's viable for somebody to play just being a merchant or just being a hauler, that got a lot of people pissed off, and they had to go through a lot of panic moves in the process. The only relic of it is the Captain's Lounge thing in EVE Online that is essentially pointless. I don't even know why EVE Online has a character creator when most of the time you're going to be looking at ships and getting screwed over by other people's ships. But
Hey, maybe they're firm believers that maybe they believe that what's inside matters too. That who's inside the ship matters too. I don't know. And then I've only barely been touching Eve for the past month or two, so what do I know?
been playing EVE off and on since the late 2000s. But I feel like this announcement of trying to do TV and film for World of Darkness is trying to pull a Me Too in this, because it's coming just shortly after there was that announcement of D&D going full speed ahead with trying again with film and television. I'm holding caution, but given what's been going on in the tabletop realm when it comes to Vampire, I'm not exactly optimistic. But hey, maybe this gets off the ground, then Onyx Path will actually release a book on time. Damn it! Speaking of shit shows, So it looks like
Uh,
HBO
boy.
is going all in with the House of the Dragon prequel.
Dear
I
Jesus
was
God.
never Now, if there's any solace, Dan and Dave aren't involved. So thank God for small favors.
Yeah,
And there's also the fact that Fire and Blood is a completed story.
thank God.
But the big problem that I have is the end the there is far the ending for Game of Thrones has such baggage, and I said this when that ending went down. The amount of negative reaction that it ended up getting was going to taint any further projects. Because
Mm-hmm.
and I guarantee this is going to be the thought that people are going to have. What they're going to think, why should I try again with considering how well the last time somebody tried this turned out? You know how One More Day left a permanent stain on Spider-Man for years?
Yep.
It's the same principle here.
Mm.
Even if this is a prequel, people are still going to be thinking about that.
Yeah.
Now they've shown I get the feeling that the main reason this is getting pushed forward is AT&T wants content for HBO Max, which is also the reason why there's a civil war going on between AT&T and Warner. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
Mhm.
Combine that with the fact that Game of Thrones has a surprising lot of fans, or maybe not surprising, and go from there.
The amount of fans isn't really a factor. The as I mentioned before, the big problem is that that ending has tainted the image. But next, um, as it's Arcaven Comics has recently launched and basically intends on being their own alternative to places like Webtoon. Um, and some of the people there's a couple people I know who are involved in it. One of them being John Della Rose, who's putting up his comic Deus Volt on the thing. I've seen some people write it off as a bunch of blank wings, making their own site. But you told them make their own platform, so they did. Um, but apparently he's not planning on doing it. They're not planning on doing any sort of freemium thing. Um, said in a press release, it said, in addition to the 17 series that have been announced, an additional 17 comics from Arcaven Comics, Super Prumo, and other publishers are already scheduled for release and will be announced over the next week on the date of their first appearance on the new digital comics site. As noted above, Arcaven promises every Arctoons title will run weekly episodes, and the site is expected to feature more comics content in the first month alone than was solicited by DC Comics in May. They are they do have subscription options but they intend on keeping it a free to view site.
Mm.
No paywall and no subscriber exclusive content, saying we're not interested in limiting the availability. He also added, we've seen this content support model utilized successfully in several other industries, and we know that people understand the importance of backing comics content they actually want instead of limiting themselves to the converged content imposed by huge corporations that hate them. In fact, they tout the platform already has more than 30% of the subscribers it believes it needs in order to establish what Arkhaven lead writer Chuck Dixon describes as a perpetual production model. So at the very least, it'll be an avenue for people to get their stuff out there. Lord knows I need it because it's hard. There's a lot of very promising indie comics that I see all the time through Indiegogo, and I have a hard time keeping up. But speaking of comics, I feel like go ahead.
Speaking of comics, the fine folks at Marvel are assembling a little gala for for those who are X-Men fans, and
I hate it. I believe everybody who drew this should be arrested for crimes against fashion.
I was going to say the outfits could have used a little work. But hey, each their own.
Like, just some guy put a 2-minute video that was just cut to each of the outfits getting roasted by one of the judges from Project Runway. And I haven't even seen that show, and even I was able to get a laugh at how brutal some of the roasting got. But I look at a lot of them, and some of them are tolerable. Like Wolverine and Sage's and Domino's getup it's not terrible. It's certainly pushing things a little bit, but I've certainly seen worse. But Professor X, what the fuck? I have no idea what the deal with that tie is with Banshee, and Iceman is a big case of overkill. I would say that the only one in the third image that seems to be somewhat reasonable is Mr. Sinister, but he already has a ridiculous getup as it is. Sunfire isn't too bad. Sync, no. I don't mind Colossus or Cannonballs, but the one for Emma Frost, dear God, why? There's a lot of very wrong, including the one for Rachel Summers looks like it came straight out of Liefeld's Nightmares. I realize that red carpets naturally bring ridiculous outfits, but even I have my limits. There's clearly a line at some point, and we've more than crossed it. But if this is supposed to be to get people to pick up X-Men, Fishin' mailed is what I have to say.
Fishing mailed. We'll have next time, probably.
Then we had a case of game journalists being game journalists, and a bunch of journalists got really butt mad over the matter. So the this whole thing started when when a certain journalist had covered that that the most recent character of Apex Legends is Valkyrie, a who is a Titan pilot, and essentially is the daughter of Viper, i.e., my most hated boss fight in Titanfall 2. But then, but there was one comment on the matter that got Respawn's attention, saying, quote, "The animated short film follows the story of Valkyrie, a pilot searching for a way into the Apex games. As we find out, her father was once a pilot of a North Star-class Titan, but died, possibly in the Apex games himself. Whatever the cause of death, Valkyrie blames Titanfall 2 antagonist Kuben Blisk, who knew Valkyrie and her father when she was a child, known as Viper. Whatever the cause of death, we know the cause of death. We shot him."
Yeah.
And Respawn replied, "We suggest you check your sources. Here's a great place to start." And they post the Steam link for Titanfall 2. And then a bunch of other journalists and blue checkmarks decided to try and dogpile on them for it. But as far as I'm aware, Respawn, not only did they not take the thing down, they did a free weekend for Titanfall 2 as a means of helping promote the upcoming event, and ended up getting a increase in their player base by about 7 times over. And
Damn.
they were having server issues for about a day. So, whoops.
Yeah. Whoopsie.
But I'll give Respawn their credit for sticking to their guns on this, but also drink for Polygon.
Yeah, drink for Polygon.
See, this is why I'm glad I never pursued journalism as a career, because I didn't have to work with these kind of people.
Yeah.
So, next, we have the fact that the creator of the Saga series, hot off the heels of the remastered release of Saga Frontier. I was about to say the first game in the Saga series, but that's not the case. It's the first one that we knew about, because the Game Boy Saga games weren't called that for the longest time. But Akitoshi Kawazu has revealed that he's got another game in development, and he wants to bring more older titles to modern systems. According to Famitsu, the report is that among the various topics discussed during a recent Square Enix livestream, Kawazu discussed how players could unlock the Fuse campaign, and the developer run that remained in the remastered version. The live stream a bit more, and the live stream concluded with Kawazu saying that a new Saga game was in development, along with discussing how some prior games in the series had yet to appear on modern consoles, namely Romancing Saga, Saga Frontier 2, and Unlimited Saga. He explained, "We're thinking of somehow releasing those titles so that everyone can play them at any time." As far as the new one that you're planning, I have one request. Don't make it an iOS game.
Yeah.
I'm already mad that there was all that hubbub about Mistwalker's next project, and it turns out to be another mobile game. But speaking of things, so on their bingo card, who had a Game Boy game releasing in 2021?
I just got my
What?
card, and no, I don't see it there.
So,
What?
yep. Publisher Incubate Games and development studio 7FH have announced a Game Boy shmup called Genesis. Pre-orders are now live, letting you get a real new game for the original Game Boy.
Oh,
They're
here's
off.
my
Okay.
Oh, here's my question. Who even still owns one?
Have you?
I do,
Mhm.
and I gotta say, how the fuck is a shoot 'em up supposed to work on the Game Boy?
I'll
It's
offend you.
basic. It's for all intents and purposes, it seems to be a rail shooter.
Neat.
So, and looking at the footage now, that's exactly what it is. I'll give them credit for the surprise. It was made using GBDK, which is a development kit,
Ah.
and will be fully compatible with Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance.
Yay.
Um, I get the feeling most people buying this will be using it on a Game Boy Color or Advance instead of a original, especially given
Yeah.
that there are certain screen issues with the original Game Boy that later versions don't have. Namely, what can be described as screen bleeding.
Ew.
My question is it going to be using password saves? Dear God, I hope not. I'm not going back to
No.
password saves.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know what we haven't had tonight? Legal bullshit.
Ugh.
So, Wolffire Games has filed an antitrust lawsuit against Valve for its 30% revenue cut, and allegedly for forbidding games from being sold cheaper elsewhere. This was broke by Law 360 via GamesIndustry.biz, saying that the lawsuit was filed by the Overgrowth and Receiver 2 developer on April 27th in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Washington, along with William Herbert and Daniel Escobar. The lawsuit focuses on the 30% revenue cut on Steam and how 75% of PC game sales in the US are via Steam, claiming Valve uses that dominance to take an extraordinarily high cut from nearly every sale that passes through its store, going as far as stating Valve uses this dominance to exploit publishers and consumers. One method of this alleged scheme is via the Steam key price parity provision. This allegedly prevents publishers from selling the game for a better price on other platforms. This creates a vicious cycle. Other stores struggle to compete, thereby forcing publishers and developers to continue to use Steam over them. Further, the lawsuit claims Valve reserves the right to deny keys or revoke key requesting privileges if they disadvantage Steam's customers. The suit claims that their terms language is using the notion of protecting their customers as a charade. Except I feel like that whole focusing on that whole disadvantaging Steam's customers is going to come back and bite them in court.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It said, quote, "Those customers are the same ones that can and do purchase Steam keys on other storefronts besides the Steam store," which is true. That's a case in point would be Humble Bundle. "They are harmed when they cannot find games for lower prices elsewhere because Valve has restrained price competition through its price parity provision. Moreover, Valve explicitly instructs publishers that Valve enforces this position to, quote, avoid a situation where customers get a worse offer on the Steam store. Put another way, Valve uses this restriction to prevent customers from getting a better deal anywhere other than on the Steam store. Thus, rival distributors have no meaningful way to attract publisher customers and take away share from Valve, because their efforts to compete on price, e.g. by charging lower commissions, are blocked by Valve's price parity requirements. The lawsuit also highlights Epic Games Store takes only 12% from sales, something Epic Games heavily focused on when they launched. In the ongoing Apple versus Epic lawsuit, the latter has claimed the Epic Games Store will not be profitable until 2023. Apple predicts until 2027. In other news, Microsoft announced that they are reducing their take from PC games on the Microsoft Store also to 12%. Which is nice, but the Microsoft Store is not is barely kept alive anyways. I'd say if somebody's buying games on a Microsoft service, it's probably through the Xbox Store, not Microsoft. Mostly because I tooled around on their site once when Phantom Dust got revived, and its navigational setup is not exactly something to be proud of. And so I've made it clear that nothing turns me off more than bad navigation.
Yeah.
Now when it comes to the 30% cut, I think there's a strong enough case for that to not get thrown out. But that whole right to deny keys is something that I'm a little less inclined to go with, simply because you're trying to make that argument when they've had to deal with botters and people trying to abuse the system for years, up to and including the infamous era of asset flips. Now, I'm not defending Steam in any regard. They take a long ass time to actually get shit done. But at the same time, if this goes to say Discovery, a judge is probably going to ask them why did you, ask them to further go into why you called the whole protecting their customers thing a charade. Like, the worst that could be said about it is that it's vaguely worded, but that's not a very strong case. I do think that it couldn't hurt them to drop the 30% revenue cut, though.
Yeah.
So next, because of the fact that games getting canceled pisses me off. I have never forgiven Disney for denying me Armada of the Damned.
Yeah.
But one game back on the SNES that was canceled is getting released. Publisher Pix and Love Games and developer Aurora Game Studio have announced that the canceled SNES game Nightmare Busters Rebirth is finally getting released for PC and consoles. It was originally developed by Arcade Zone in 1994, a run and gunner that's now finally getting its due. As far as a release date, it's not. They haven't said. But it looks like they are very early in development at this point, just moving over these sprites into something a little bit nicer. That wasn't the only one. Apparently, Clockwork Aquario, which had gotten canceled in the 90s, is releasing for Switch and PS4. Something else. Speaking of canceled, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the Resurrection prototype, especially with Season 4 of the Castlevania anime on the way.
Yep.
So, the prototype which I think we talked about a few weeks ago, um, is now available online mere weeks after the game resurfaced. Now, Combi Laurent, the owner of the site that acquired the game, so now the prototype is available online. This was essentially the material that was shown in E3 1999. It was it was developed in-house by Konami and was supposed to be a reboot of the series, focusing on Sonia Belmont and a Victor Belmont. Um,
Hmm.
it's a pre-E3 demo, which has 5 environments and a boss fight. And since it's a beta, most of the areas are not connected, but they're available from a start menu. Although one of them apparently isn't loading properly because, well, this was never finished.
Mm.
Resurrection was supposed to be set in 1666. Cute. And was go- and was essentially going to be a kind of soft reboot. Um, since the year is set a few years before Simon Belmont's adventures. The the cancellation, according to art director Greg Ordurian, had to deal with disagreements between the Japanese and American teams and the lifespan of the Dreamcast. Um,
Mm.
it was supposed to follow Sonia Belmont, and a newcomer Victor Belmont. Victor would get a reincarnation of sorts as the last Belmont in Lords of Shadow 2. Don't know if that's an upgrade, but Sonia would be removed from canon.
That sucks.
Um, I do remember reading people asking about this project in Dreamcast magazine when I still had it. The word was that either Konami in either Japan or the States was not happy with how the project was developing.
Mm.
I can't help but imagine that they were a little bit skittish about the idea of moving Castlevania to 3D after what happened with 64.
Ah.
Not in the sense that they wouldn't greenlight the thing, but more of they'd run at the first sign of trouble.
Hey, Mildred,
Shoot,
what did you say you hated earlier? Confusing menus?
I said bad navigation.
Well, that Stadia might have something to help with that.
Yeah, which brings us to one of my favorite games. Let's all laugh at the Stadia as soon as the demo hits.
Oh yeah. I hate posting about this. It's like Google, you
Democrats
sons of bitches.
comes out swinging.
It's like Google, you sons of bitches. You take this long to add a search bar to Stadia? My God, you're dumb.
Oh dear Lord.
It took the Stadia has been out for more than 500 days, and only 3 days ago do they finally announce that they're putting in a search bar. And of course, people are roasting them in the comments. We have one of my fellow shit posters, Rodrigo, doing the Titus laugh. Um,
Oh God, that laugh.
mhm. um, Apparently, Enigma asking, "Will we be able to play in Australia anytime soon?" and getting a canned answer. Um, let's see. And yeah, a lot of people are doing are just roasting them alive over
No shit!
over the whole thing, including one person who said, "Oh my goodness, a search engine company figured out how to make a search bar on a dead platform that has been dead for years. Wow, congrats. You did so well, Google, adding that in at the most perfect time when people are using it. Wow, incredible. I applaud you."
The sarcasm is strong with this comment.
Yes.
And one person said, "Is your new search bar powered by Google?"
Dude. It probably is.
That's the joke.
You think the pain?
Google practically invented the modern search bar, and they couldn't put it on their gaming platform for launch. And David Cameron posts a gif of the gates of irony.
So, guys, I'm afraid I had to bring the room down because we have two of your unholy quartet up for debate this time.
Yeah, let's get into it. I'll start. The first one that we've got to start with is and my soundboard still doesn't work, so no sound bites. But yeah, it's time to talk about EA.
Egregious assholes.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember how the button went, I would have imitated it.
Yeah. But this week, the gang gets busted with whale hunting. So this was brought out by an insider. So as always, take it with a grain of salt. But a gaming insider said a internal company document proves EA is trying to drive players into essentially getting them to spend more money, which has come under fire for links to gambling. The leaked 54-page document comes from the company's sports division in Burnaby, BC, where a team works on the FIFA soccer games. It appears to be a presentation featuring numerous slides with bullet points about the release of FIFA 21 and was shared internally. It discusses a mode of play which lets people buy loot boxes within the game to improve play. It also says that that FIFA Ultimate Team is the cornerstone of the game. Quote, "We're doing everything we can to drive players there," a bullet point close to the top of the document says. Another says the presentation refers to content teasers that will, quote, "drive excitement and funnel players towards Ultimate Team from other modes," under a bullet point labeled "All Roads Lead to Ultimate Team." And then we have some of the more familiar matters. This is something that I really don't like that a lot of articles do, where they give a bit of info and then repeat info that's already been shared in some form. It's just padding. Now, of course, EA responded to the matter.
Probably in bad fashion because EA.
All that they said was, "We do not push, quote unquote, people to spend in our games." You smell that?
Ha ha!
Zell, you smell that?
Yeah, I think I do. I smell bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Nobody is fucking buying that they don't push people to spend.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, I'm allergic to bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Especially whether I get the feeling that this is going to be that once again you're going to see a representative from Electronic Arts front and center in some sort of professional grilling in the next year.
Yeah.
If not face to face, then it's going to be done over Zoom. But then we had the unfortunate news regarding the asshats of Activision. I'm not doing the song.
Oh boy.
So it's implied that there's been some shakeups from Activision, and this comes through Cartridge Games and through one of the character designers at Toys for Bob.
And then the same guys who've handled both the Spiral Reunited trilogy and Saints trilogy and Crash 4, if I remember right.
Yep. And now they're being relegated to a support studio for Season 3 of COD Warzone.
Ouch.
Not only and that wasn't the and apparently according to Andy Robinson of formerly of Platonic, he's claiming that virtually every studio at Activision is working on COD. And you know the saying about putting your eggs in one basket, right?
Yeah.
I think that applies here because if you're having the majority of your studios working on that, who's going to work on the future? Because eventually the content is going to run dry when it comes to COD Warzone. I got nothing against Warzone aside from what I usually have against Battle Royale games, but nothing lasts forever, and eventually the market for that is gonna dry up.
Still, for those of you who are expecting Crash 5, let's just say the wait got a lot longer.
I find it interesting that this dropped, considering that a few weeks back we had talked about how the PC version of Crash 4 had DRM. But speaking of that, Jeff Kaplan, Mr. Overwatch himself for the longest time, and the vice president of Blizzard, has left the company. He was there for 18 years.
Ew.
And was one of the founders of the dev team for Overwatch. Oh, sorry. Actually, no, I take that back. Aaron Keller, who's been around there for 18 years and was a founding member of the team, will be the new game director in Kaplan's stead.
Thank God, but still, damn.
I would not be surprised if he ends up working with one of the many post Blizzard companies that have cropped up in the last 6 months.
Yep.
Although at the very least, he was only the second saddest thing that happened during BlizzCon Online this year. The most sad thing was Metallica playing their own songs on Twitch and getting muted over copy bots.
DMCA's.
But on a lighter note, a little project called Archaea is getting a Switch port this May. It's going to be online exclusive on the eShop. $40 is a little is a little steep though. But hey, I'm perfectly fine with more rhythm games out there because the world shouldn't revolve around Beat Saber and OS.
Yeah.
And granted, this particular one has been out there for a while. But it's nice to see it going on Switch for people who aren't PC master races like myself. Plus, having touchscreen options makes this a natural fit. Just hopefully you don't break the thing. But next we have a little project called Retro Machina. Coming to us from super.com, it is releasing May 12th. Set in a retro-futuristic world, long after the disappearance of humanity, you play as a small robot that has been kicked out of its domed city for malfunctioning. Okay, make your Ratchet and Clank jokes. I know you got them.
I don't play Ratchet and Clank, so.
Okay, I got one. So if we're playing Clank, then who's gonna be the Ratchet in this scenario?
Although I do like that we're going full ISO with this kind of thing. Reminds me of some of Supergiant's work. Just a lot brighter. But yeah, it's going to be launching May 12th on Steam. Next, something that is right in my wheelhouse. Necromunda Hired Gun. Focus had published a year ago Necromunda Hive Wars, and looks like instead of going for the tactics RPG approach, now we're going for a good old fashioned shooter. Necromunda is a hive city. The best way for me to describe a hive city is imagine Mega City 1 from Judge Dredd, just 100 times bigger and 100 times worse.
Damn.
With constant, unending gang fights.
Yuck.
And in this case, you are playing as a bounty hunter, and taking jobs along the way and hoping you don't get yourself killed.
So you're basically a mercenary in a hive world.
More or less. It kind of reminds me of the Prey 2 that we didn't get.
Huh.
Yeah.
But the keyword here is try not to get killed, because as I've made it clear, Necromunda is a hive city. Hive cities are shitholes.
Mm-hmm.
But what I am curious about is how they're going to handle the shooting end of things, because Focus Interactive doesn't have a strong background in shooters. But let me see who's up. So it's launching June 1st. I'm trying to see who's publishing the thing. Strem on Studio. Haven't heard of them, but I definitely like the amount of speed that they're having, and the last FPS in Warhammer that we had, well, the last two that we had were not exactly stellar. There was Space Hulk Deathwing, which has better multiplayer than it has single player and is very janky. And before that, there was Fire Warrior on the PS2, which had some of the worst gun spread I've ever seen, and was advertised as a Halo killer. Kind of tempting fate there, don't you think? But on the other hand, we're getting some more material for Blood Bowl 3, which makes me happy.
Nice.
Specifically, we have a bit on the Black Orcs. And I've talked about in the past, I have a special place in my heart for Blood Bowl because it is basically what would happen if you took if you took the races of Warhammer and had them play American football. And then have the rules be more of suggestions.
So basically, complete and total insanity.
Yeah, especially since this is a full contact sport, and well, you know how in the real world there's been all these controversies about what counts as roughing the passer or not. In this case, roughing the passer, if the passer's not dead, then he's fine. But especially given how as we can see here, we've got the fact that the troll on the team decides to take the approach of using linemen as much of the ball as anybody else. It's appropriate that this is coming out when the original Blood Bowl tabletop game is getting a re-release. But the funny thing about Black Orcs is that even normal orcs are kind of scared of them. But next, we have a interesting little project called Jin Conception, which is heading out May 12th from Jinwave Studios. They're describing it as a social deduction fantasy thriller turn-based RPG. It's a lot of tags there. It was already announced for the PC, and now it's getting a Switch version as well. In a weird way, kind of reminds me of actually this is gonna be the closest thing that's gonna remind me of Chrono Trigger that I'll see for a while. And possibly a little bit of Final Fantasy V. Their sprite game is on point at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I'm going to be keeping a close eye on this one. Who knows? It may even be enough to get me off my ass and start streaming games again. But that's crazy talk. I'm not sure where the social deduction part comes in, but I'll probably see once I do a little bit more research. Something that's heading into early access, coming to us from Versus Evil, and they're about to wash the stain of Afro Samurai 2 off of their hands, is The Hand of Merlin. I.e., Arthurian Legends versus Cosmic Horror. And it looks like they're coming out. They're putting it on early access May 11th, i.e., my state's birthday. I don't know why I know that, but I do. But the idea of doing this kind of spin of cosmic horror versus Arthurian myth, I'm perfectly fine with that because people tend to play things a little safe for the longest time when it comes to King Arthur. Whereas I'm more inclined to want something a little more bonkers. Maybe it's because I grew up with King Arthur and the Knights of Justice.
Probably.
Hey, it made for a good meme, and I was able to make people suffer for making them feel old.
Mm-hmm.
And roast Ryu Soldier.
Yeah.
But next, and this is not going to be the last time we talk about this particular point in history, we're getting a strategy RPG from THQ Nordic all about Rome. Specifically, a legatus dealing with a Greek rebellion. And from the looks of things, we are going with the turn-based strategic approach. I'd like to see if they have some sort of formation system because we are dealing with Roman soldiers. But this is definitely going to be in my kind of wheelhouse. But there's a small part of me that would like to see some degree of an action game set in Rome because the last one we had was Rise, and that was almost a decade ago. But at the very least, this particular strategy game is using hexes instead of squares. You don't see that all that often.
Nope.
Next is a little project from Event Horizon called Dark Envoy, which they're describing as a party-based RPG. And let's take a they do have a Steam page for the project. But it looks like they are going into the realm of dark fantasy with the approach, as evidenced by the name. Though, fortunately, they're not going full on traditional approach because we've got friggin' airships and some form of magitech. So it's definitely right up my alley. Next, something that I might throw shades way, Fearmonium, which has described itself as a psychedelic Metroidvania, which is going to be heading out May 20th on PC. Let's see. In the game, players control a growing phobia within the darkest subconscious depths of a young boy Mac's traumatized mind. A scary encounter with circus clowns has developed into a full-blown crippling phobia. Travel through his repressed memories, navigate psychedelic levels, and fight enemies based on Max's anxieties.
So this is basically a mental Metroidvania.
Yeah, just with a degree of carny humor.
Oh boy.
And looks like some slight inspiration from Cuphead.
Mm.
At least in terms of, in fact, I'd say it would be what would happen if Cuphead met with Symphony of the Night.
Ah.
That would be a very different game than what we got.
And I will admit the main reason I'm drawing that conclusion is the animation style. But all of this because of a fear of clowns. Why is it all? I've never been afraid of clowns. I just find them annoying.
Yeah.
That's-
Guys, that asshole.
You know the main reason people are scared of clowns? It. At least that's what I'm guessing.
No, I've known people who had a fear of clowns who never saw that movie, so I can't go with that approach. Um, but we are going to be dealing with pain given what's coming next month. Because I know somebody's gonna end up sending this to me. Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection.
Oh, God fucking damn it, Ghosts and Goblins again. Well, time for controllers to break in half.
Yeah, I did see the demo vid that Matt McMuscles put out a few months back, and I appreciate that it's going for more of a storybook-like look, but it's definitely just as hard, even though they have put a slightly easier mode. Slightly. Even the easy mode is still going to give you a run. It's kind of like going with still kicking in Blood, which is still kicking is the easiest difficulty in Blood and is more akin to the normal difficulty in a lot of other shooters of its day. Of course, then you go higher than that, and Pain.
Yep.
Quick question. Quick question. Is Ghosts and Goblins a natural nightmare mode, or does it actually have its own unlockable nightmare difficulty for the true psychopaths?
No, it's Nintendo hard.
Ah.
Now, one project that I've been keeping an eye on that's also from Versus Evil and developer Runwild is Almighty Kill Your Gods, which is finally going to be heading into early access in 4 days. And unfortunately, the video is age restricted, and I don't feel like just opening the thing up in YouTube. So, fuck off, Susan. That's something that did make me happy is seeing what's known as Overkill. Basically a 3D version of Dungeon and Fighter, or Dungeon Fighter Online as it's known in the States. And is going for a 3D character action approach. And I am perfectly fine with this because I spent more hours than I'd care to admit with DFO. Now, further details have not been forthcoming, although it is being built on Unreal Engine 4.
Huh. Dungeon Fighter. Mildra, I'm just gonna ask, is that game still open?
I haven't checked in a while. I think so.
I'll check for myself after we're done here.
I will say the visual game is on point, which is saying something because there was some pretty good sprite work in the original for a for the setup that it had. But next is something that I knew was coming, and I'm glad to see it I'm glad to see it showing up. Total War Rome Remastered. Sad state of affairs when the only way for Creative Assembly to get some positive feedback these days is to go back. I did say we were going to see some more. We were going to see some more stuff with Rome, and I always keep my word.
Mm-hmm.
But what they are basically doing is just bring bring back the original Rome with a lot of quality of life updates. Um, I'm hoping that they've managed to iron out some of the kinks with Warscape, but I'm not holding my breath. But one thing that I thought was a nice little addition is that um, anybody who already has the original version on Steam gets half off on the remaster, and they're not trying to. Unlike a certain other publisher, they're not trying to force people to go for the remaster. So if this one isn't up to your speed, you can still load up the original.
Hallelujah.
But the but lastly, it looks like the dev for Celeste hasn't been sitting still. The slightly inappropriately named Extremely OK Games has revealed a project called Earthblade, which is set for what they said is a 20XX release, meaning I don't fucking know. Um, they had said with they had also said that it could be released within 5 short years of Celeste, which was an intentional jab at fans saying things like "Get ready to wait 5 years." After Celeste release, because their first game Towerfall was all the way back in 2013. But apparently, what they're now developing as Earthblade is the result of 4 different prototypes, and this was more of an announcement that they're working on the thing. We don't have any footage, and we probably won't for a fair while. But at the very at judging by the cover, at least we're going a little bit more in the fantastical route of things. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if one, it ends up going further down that route, and two, people end up making some Secret of Mana comparisons, especially with that art. But
Mm.
with all that said, that is going to wrap it up for the Gazette this week. We'll be back here in 2 weeks with the next iteration of the Gazette with whatever bit of news or insanity comes up. I know that there was the temptation to bring up that Kotaku article that was a massive fail, but I figured dealing with one bit of game journalism stupidity was enough to meet my quota, so I didn't cover it. Plus, I found out about it after the deadline. And of course the next couple of weeks are going to be especially stacked here in the temple. Even by my standards. So keep an eye out for that. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
Good night.